Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and Loki Season 2 reveals the TVA to be much darker than we thought, with torture devices and a process of killing beyond pruning someone out of time so that they can get fed to a smoke monster. And this video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes launching your website a breeze. But what exactly is the difference between pruning and death in the TVA of the Marvel Universe? Yeah, this video is essentially asking, what happens when we die? And hoping for a clear answer from I am going to do my best to explain Marvel's distinction between death and pruning, and how it all comes down to the concept of the temporal aura. And by the way, I am wearing one of our Loki-inspired shirt designs, available from nerdriot.shop. Really the best way to support what we're doing here to best cover the season of Loki Season 2. Okay, up through Loki Season 1, Episode 4, we had assumed that there was one way in and one way out of the TVA. To get in, the TVA hunters open a time door and physically drag you into the TVA, and then to get out, to like permanently get out, they prune you out of existence. But when Loki got pruned in Episode 4, he woke up in the Void, a junkyard filled with other pruned objects and people. The Void is where Mobius ended up when he was pruned, and where Sylvie ended up when she pruned herself. The idea was the Void is a kind of temporary limbo where you would be found by Alioth and promptly consumed. And at that point, you're really gone forever, passed on to whatever afterlife Marvel Studios is going with that month, because so far we've seen Valhalla, the Ancestral Plane, the Duat of Moon Knight, that orange-colored way station that Thanos visited, the whole limbo realm that Rocket entered in Guardians Volume 3, though we do have to say in Moon Knight, Taweret explained that the Duat in the Wakandan Ancestral Plane were part of the same concept, but we just don't know if any of that is going to apply to this title or any future Marvel title. What we do know is that there seems to be a difference between pruning and killing, and that directly dying is now absolutely a possibility in the TVA, a terrifying one. Back in Season 1, Episode 4, when Mobius inquired about the status of C-20, that was the hunter that Sylvie had kidnapped and enchanted, Mobius learned that her status was marked as deceased, and at the time we took that to mean that she was just pruned, but this was before the Void episode, so we weren't really sure if that meant executed or banished to the Void and fed to Alioth, and at that point a death by exile. But now in Season 2, Episode 2 of Loki, B-15 doesn't really mince words about what happened to C-20.
Renslayer killed C-20, attempted to kill Mobius, threw me in time jail, and tried to take over the TVA.
By killed C-20 and attempted to kill Mobius, it sounds like B-15 is saying Renslayer pruned C-20 as well, but that C-20 did not survive Alioth. Season 2, Episode 2 also established a horrifying new feature of the TVA, the Time Cube. Activated by a crank-operated shop vac looking thing, the Time Cube forms around an inmate and condenses at the push of a button, crushing whatever is inside. I pointed out in the breakdown how the floor beneath them is grated, as if to allow any gooey viscera to seep down into a drain. So this, plus spaghettification that OB described, are processes that lead directly to death in the TVA. In Season 2, Episode 1, OB described what this process will feel like.
And then your suit will age away, you will age away, and you'll get very old, and all your skin will get peeled away, and you will die.
Yeah, he says die. So that is what is kind of happening to Mobius's suit when he goes close to the core. The radiation is actually just rapidly aging his suit through the hundreds of years of wear and tear that it would go through in its normal existence. The reason the duct tape doesn't fray is that duct tape is one of mankind's greatest inventions and doesn't degrade as easily. So OB is saying that Mobius will get very old and lose his skin and die. So then what is pruning and how is that different? Well, pruning is the process of extracting one's temporal aura from time and displacing it somewhere else. So the temporal aura is a term that has returned this season of Loki. It sort of refers to a person's time soul, a kind of cosmic fingerprint that locates you wherever and whenever you are in the time stream and proves your identity. Like in Season 2, Episode 2, OB learns that they need the temporal aura of He Who Remains to access the temporal loom. Since He Who Remains is dead, and we know this season is going to take us to the Kang variant of Victor Timely, presumably temporal auras are shared by variants, or at least they're similar enough to register in these TVA scans. Now, if you have an online business, you're gonna want to make sure everything looks and works smoothly before the holidays roll around, which means right now is the right time to check out Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform that provides you with everything you need to do whatever you need with your website. Squarespace has templates and designs for pretty much everything. So when you're making your very first website, using Squarespace makes it super easy to customize your look, update content, and add features to fit your unique needs. For instance, Squarespace makes it easy to sell merch. You can design your products, then save time and money by letting Squarespace handle production, inventory, and shipping. And if you're selling any other kind of physical goods, digital goods, or even a service, Squarespace makes it easy to build your storefront and grow your business. To check it out for yourself, head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/newrockstars to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. So when Loki was first processed through the TVA, one of the first things they do is scan one's temporal aura.
Please confirm to your knowledge that you are not a fully robotic being. We're born an organic creature and do in fact possess what many cultures would call a soul.
What if I was a robot and I didn't know it?
The machine would melt you from the inside out.
What's that?
Your temporal aura.
So this temporal aura is just another way of measuring what human cultures consider to be a soul. And the only reason human cultures have ever identified the concept of the soul is because the human beings are trying to justify what the concept of the afterlife is. So for a culture to care about the soul is a culture to care about the afterlife and to have a religion, a spiritual belief system. But to call it the temporal aura is really the TVA trying to measure it through the dimension of time. It's a metaphysical concept that views human beings through a filtered lens of time. And this printout that Loki sees is not listed in numbers or words or data of any kind, but rather just kind of a gradient of swirling colors on developing film. Honestly, it kind of looks like the swirling colors formed when someone gets pruned. As long as those colors are still there, the temporal aura is still intact and the soul is still with us. And no final death has occurred. So long as something has a soul, it means that it registered somewhere at some time in the time stream. It was sentient life that existed, and that temporal aura can be extracted and relocated, and that's really all that pruning does. But when Alioth consumes you, that temporal aura is extinguished, and you truly are erased from all time at that point. He who remains said that Alioth was formed by the cracks in reality, so therefore Alioth is made up of non-existence, essentially. When he consumes you, he converts your matter into antimatter, and there's really no coming back from that. So at the end of season 2, episode 2, when B-15 and the others witness General Dox's successful bombing of the Sacred Timeline branches, what is really happening to all those billions of people? And by the way, in the breakdown, I did the math, and based on the number of branched Earths that would get pruned, the total number of pruned lives would be closer to 2.7 trillion, which is actually 2,700 billions. Now, General Dox achieved those prunings by using temp adds and reset charges. Each reset charge prunes an entire branch. Now, back in season 1, it wasn't totally clear if each charge had a limited range, like if it merely pruned the nearby vicinity where someone would have noticed and witnessed the altered history, and the butterfly effect could live on from that point. Like maybe it just would have pruned the Ren Fair in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, rather than all of Earth in 1985, or just that part of the Gobi Desert in 2012. But here, based on B-15's horrified reaction in season 2, episode 2, everyone who was on Earth in that particular branch timeline had lost their lives because it had already passed the red zone at that point. An entire new world had spawned from each branch. And if all of those souls were pruned and relocated to the void, where they'd be devoured by Alioth, yeah, it's just kind of an awful thing to think about. Hundreds of millions of families holding each other, screaming as they were enveloped by purple smoke. So applying this to the afterlives we've seen elsewhere in the MCU, like when Stephen Grant and Mark Spector go to the Duat, are their temporal auras, or maybe their shared one temporal aura, still intact at that point? Does Jane Foster still have a temporal aura? Did the Dusted in Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame have temporal auras? Just kind of interesting to think about. Like seeing the MCU through these time fingerprints gives us a whole new understanding of existence versus non-existence. Like if someone has ever existed, so long as someone remembers them, then they are still with us. Now it's October and I'm reminded of the understanding of the afterlife explored by those who celebrate Dia de los Muertos and honor their loved ones with ofrendas. Actually, now would be a good time to rewatch Pixar's Coco, by the way, especially if you need a good cry, or if you have loved ones in your life who are going through things like memory loss. It's really hard. I think one of the most profound things that Coco does is that they touch on this idea that we die twice. Once when our body dies, and then again when the last person who remembers us thinks about us for the last time, which is really why ancestral ofrendas are so important. So what happens when we die? Well, in the MCU and Loki, unless you spaghettify or you get crushed in a time cube, your soul really just transfers somewhere else. But the aura remains, and the aura was really the best thing about them, right? Yeah, I got kind of real there for a second there, but you know what? I think that's what good shows do. They bring us together and they take us to these places. And I hope you are getting as much out of Loki season 2 as I am, and I really appreciate you watching our videos. Myself, our writers, especially our editors, work so hard on these, and if you could just take some time to like this video, to subscribe, to check out some of our other content across our network, or if you can, support us by grabbing a shirt at nerdright.shop, we would just really appreciate it. You can follow me at EA Voss, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye, everybody.